At the beginning of the story, we see a married couple. The husband's name is Matt, and the wife's name is Ruth. Their married life is going quite happily. Matt and Ruth have a son named Frank, who is 20 years old. Frank has recently graduated from college and has come back home to spend his summer vacation. He's very happy to be back. He enjoys fishing, meeting friends, and the peace of home. But in the middle of all this, a new turning point comes into Frank's life, and that turning point is a woman named Natalie. Natalie is a 40-year-old divorced woman who lives with her 2 young sons. Natalie is much older than Frank, but despite this age difference, Frank falls in love with her. Natalie, who has already been struggling with loneliness, also starts liking Frank, and the 2 of them get into a relationship. From a normal point of view, this relationship seems quite unusual, but Frank feels completely comfortable and happy with Natalie. Frank is supposed to move out of town soon to start his post-graduation in architecture. However, for now, he decides to stay back for 1 year and work as a fisherman so that he can spend more time with Natalie and her 2 sons. When Frank tells Natalie about this decision, she asks him not to do it because it could negatively affect his career. But Frank tells her that 1 year won't make a big difference. On the other hand, Frank's parents, Matt and Ruth, are already aware that their son is in a relationship with an older, divorced woman. This makes them quite worried about Frank. Ruth wants Frank to end this relationship and focus on his studies, so she asks Matt to talk to Frank. But Matt says that Frank is still young. These things happen at this age. And anyway, Frank will be leaving soon for his post-graduation. Ruth is not satisfied with Matt's response, so she talks to Frank privately. Frank tells her that his relationship with Natalie is just casual and that neither of them is taking it too seriously. But in reality, Frank and Natalie had already started getting emotionally attached. The next day, Natalie is at her house when her ex-husband, Richard, shows up. Richard wants to get back together with Natalie, but Natalie clearly refuses because Richard is a short-tempered and violent man who has mistreated her many times in the past. That is why Natalie divorced him. Richard's family runs a local fish processing and delivery business, so he has no shortage of money. He tries to show off his wealth and tells Natalie that he can give her and the children a comfortable life, but Natalie knows very well that Richard is a toxic and controlling person, so she tells him that he is not worthy of being a father to her children. Hearing this, Richard gets extremely angry. He already knows that Natalie is in a relationship with a much younger guy, Frank, and he absolutely cannot tolerate this. Richard starts abusing Natalie verbally and then leaves the house. One day, Natalie and her children are playing in a park, and Frank is also there with them. When Richard sees Frank with them, he completely loses control. He walks up to Frank and punches him in the face, leaving his eye badly bruised and red. When Frank returns home, Matt and Ruth are furious after seeing his condition. Ruth talks about filing a case against Richard, but Frank refuses. He doesn't want Natalie to get trapped in police cases, and he doesn't want her children to witness all this mess. One evening, Frank is at his house when he suddenly receives a call from Natalie's son. The child is crying and panicking, asking Frank to come home immediately. Frank rushes to Natalie's house and sees that the living room is completely messed up, with things scattered everywhere, and Natalie is sitting there crying. She tells Frank that she had a fight with Richard, that he threw things around the house, and that he has just left. Frank hugs Natalie and tries to comfort her. He's about to call the police, but Natalie stops him and asks him not to do it.
She stops him and says that Richard is a very dangerous man. He cannot control himself when he is angry, and he is capable of doing anything. Just then, Richard comes back again and starts shouting, threatening to break the door open. Natalie quickly takes her 2 sons upstairs into a room, while Frank stands near the locked door and firmly tells Richard to leave immediately. Richard leaves from there, but after some time, he secretly enters the house through the back door. This time, Richard is carrying a gun with him. He attacks Frank and brutally beats him. Richard simply could not tolerate seeing Frank with Natalie. In a fit of uncontrollable rage, Richard shoots Frank, and Frank collapses on the spot and dies. Hearing the gunshot, Natalie rushes downstairs and sees Richard standing there, holding a gun in front of Frank's dead body. This sight completely shatters Natalie from the inside. She starts screaming and crying uncontrollably. A few days pass after this incident. Richard is arrested for the murder of Frank. But Matt and Ruth, after losing their only son, feel as if their entire world has fallen apart. Both of them are completely broken from within. They struggle deeply to come out of this trauma. Ruth starts living in isolation and becomes extremely quiet. She keeps looking at Frank's photographs, gently touching his belongings in his room, remembering him day and night. Her grief becomes so heavy that it feels as if life itself has lost all meaning for her. On the other hand, Matt is rotting inside, but he doesn't show it. He suppresses everything and remains silent. He tries to play the role of a strong father and keeps himself busy with work, but in reality, he is just as shattered and broken as Ruth. Because of this deep pain, distance and silence slowly begin to grow between Matt and Ruth. A few days later, Richard's bail hearing takes place. During the hearing, Richard's lawyer pressures Natalie and asks whether she personally saw Richard pull the trigger and shoot Frank. Natalie had not seen Richard actually pulling the trigger, so while crying, she shakes her head in denial. Because of this, Richard is granted bail after paying a certain amount. Seeing this, Matt and Ruth are furious. They speak to their lawyer, who explains that Natalie did not directly witness Richard shooting Frank, which is why the court granted him bail. The lawyer further says that if Richard's defense proves that during the fight between Richard and Frank, the gun went off accidentally or in anger, and that Frank's death was an accident, then Richard might only face 5 to 15 years in prison. He also tells them that the next trial could take 12 to 18 months to begin. Hearing this, Matt and Ruth feel completely devastated. They wanted Richard to receive the harshest punishment possible, but now the man who killed their son is freely roaming around the city as if he committed no crime at all. Helplessly, Matt and Ruth are forced to see their son's killer walking free, which clearly exposes how weak and powerless the city's legal system really is. A few days later, Matt and Ruth go to their friend's cottage to spend the weekend. But even there, Ruth remains distant, barely talking to anyone. One day, instead of going to work, Matt goes to a store where Natalie works. He asks Natalie about her and the children. Natalie says that they are fine. When she apologizes to Matt about Frank, Matt becomes deeply emotional and quietly leaves from there. Later, remembering Frank, Matt goes out to sea on a boat to catch lobsters, because Frank often used to come there for lobster fishing. While trying to catch lobsters, one of them clamps onto Matt's finger, causing it to bleed heavily. Matt quickly wraps a bandage around his hand to stop the bleeding. Meanwhile, Natalie goes to meet Ruth and tries to apologize, but Ruth, overwhelmed with anger, slaps Natalie. Ruth believes that if Frank had never gotten into a relationship with her, he would still be alive today. Natalie, completely heartbroken, leaves the place crying. A few days later, Ruth is shopping at a store when
she suddenly sees Richard. The moment Ruth notices him, she feels deeply disturbed. She thinks about how the man who should be behind bars is freely walking around in the open. Angrily, Ruth leaves the place and goes straight home. A little later, when Matt comes back home, Ruth starts yelling at him and tells him that she saw Richard today. She goes on to say that if he had paid more attention to Frank, their son would still be alive today. Matt responds by saying that she tried to control Frank so much that he eventually stopped listening to them at all. A heated argument breaks out between the two, but soon both of them realize their mistakes. They apologize to each other and sit down together, talking over drinks. Both Matt and Ruth had been trying hard to get Richard punished, but so far they hadn't succeeded because Richard's family was wealthy and influential. Because of this power and money, the action that should have been taken against Richard was never properly enforced. Ruth says to Matt, "What kind of law and order system is this that can't even give us justice?" Matt replies that rich and powerful people always find a way to bend the law in their favor. Later that night, Matt is drinking with his best friend. He tells him how Richard is roaming free even after killing his son, and how he has failed to get justice for Frank. At this point, Matt and his friend come up with a plan that would ensure Richard would never have to face them again. Late at night, as Richard is walking home from a club, Matt pulls up near him in his car. He steps out and points a gun straight at Richard. Richard asks him to lower the gun and talk, but Matt refuses to listen. Matt tells him that after his bail period ends, he won't be going to jail because Matt is going to send him very far away from the city. That way, Richard won't go to prison, and he will also disappear from their lives, so they won't have to see his face again. Matt then forces Richard at gunpoint to get into the car and makes him drive toward his own house. Once there, Matt pressures Richard to pack his clothes. Terrified, Richard obeys. After that, Matt makes Richard drive toward the forest, where Matt's friend is already waiting with another vehicle. When they reach the forest, Matt's friend starts loading Richard's belongings into the second car, just as planned. But suddenly, Matt becomes conflicted. As a father, he feels that if he does nothing, he will remain a failed and cowardly parent. All the suppressed pain inside Matt erupts. In a moment of uncontrollable rage, he shoots Richard multiple times, killing him on the spot. Matt's friend shouts at him for doing this, but Matt replies that he cannot let his son's killer walk away alive. After this, Matt and his friend bury Richard's body deep inside the forest and drive away. However, on the way back, they get stuck at a bridge crossing. Matt's friend becomes anxious because the plan was to return home by 3 a.m. so that no one would suspect anything. But instead, they reach home at 4 a.m. Matt goes inside the house, changes his clothes in the bathroom, and cleans himself. Then he walks into the bedroom and finds Ruth awake. Matt quietly lies down beside her. She asks him, "Did you get it done?" Matt looks disturbed and emotionally numb and gives no answer. Then Ruth gets up to make coffee and calls out from the kitchen, "Matt, will you have some coffee?" But Matt doesn't respond. He removes the bandage from his finger, the same finger that was injured while catching lobsters earlier, and sees that the wound has completely healed. By killing Richard, Matt has neither achieved victory nor found peace for his soul. He has only released the poison that was burning inside him. And with this, the movie comes to an end. Friends, thank you very much for watching the video till the end. Don't forget to like and share the video, subscribe to the channel, and press the bell icon so you don't miss upcoming videos. We'll meet again in the next video. Till then, bye-bye. Take care.